At least 21 Americans working at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba, have been victims of suspected health attacks. They're suffering from headaches, hearing loss, memory issues, and other symptoms following these mysterious sonic incidents. And according to a document obtained by CBS News, the State Department may have been fully aware of the extent of the attacks long before it was forced to acknowledge them. Steve Dorsey has been covering the story from the start. He joins us now from Washington. So, Steve, tell us more about this document you obtained. What exactly does it tell us?
Well, this document is internal to the State Department's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs. It shows the State Department was fully aware of the extent of these attacks, affecting as many as 24 of its diplomats working in Havana, Cuba since late 2016, all while keeping it hidden from the public for months.
And so, Steve, has there been a response from the State Department as to why it took so long to disclose the attacks?
Yeah, within the last few hours, the State Department has responded to CBS News after we first began reporting this internal document. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said, quote, "Any suggestion that the department has been less than transparent with those affected by these incidents, their families, or our colleagues in Havana is false." But that still doesn't address why the State Department waited months before only addressing these attacks affecting many of our own American workers in Havana for the government after the press was the first to report it.
Well, has there been a response at all, Steve, from the Cuban government?
Yesterday, the Cuban government put out a statement to reporters saying it met with State Department officials in Washington and that it, again, denies it had any role in these attacks and also denies it would ever allow a third-party country to target Americans working there.
What about that possibility, Steve? I mean, what is the likelihood that perhaps a third country could be behind these attacks, maybe a U.S. adversary like Iran, North Korea, or Russia?
Yeah, this is something that analysts, especially intelligence analysts working in the American government and experts on U.S. and Cuba policy have been looking into, especially with regards to whether a country, most likely perhaps Russia, would want to drive a wedge between what were warming relations under President Obama since they began last year and the U.S. And this is something that would have played towards their advantage to separate further Cuba from the U.S., but Russia, at least for its part, denies it had any involvement.
Well, so former President Obama's efforts to restore relations with Cuba were historic. President Trump called their government, quote, corrupt and destabilizing in his speech to the UN Tuesday. How is this threatening the delicate relationship between the former Cold War rivals?
Well, to be honest, I think the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba was already on the rocks. Once President Trump took over the White House, he signaled he would get tougher with Cuba. You saw that in his speech at the United Nations. And already a few months ago, he made efforts to roll back some of those efforts under President Obama to warm up relations. But this could seriously threaten that current relationship, especially as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson considers a request to close down the U.S. Embassy in Havana. Experts I talked to, however, say the U.S. still needs to communicate with Cuba on key issues, including migration, drugs, and the environment.
Well, Steve, I know you've been on this story from the beginning, really compelling reporting, and this mystery only is deepening. Steve Dorsey for us. Steve, thank you.
Thank you.